Welcome everyone, Christine here with a further discussion about the best legendary lords for every single race. I'm not going to talk about the ogres in this video. The ogres are one of the worst races in the game at the moment. I don't expect that to change anytime soon given Creative Assembly's DLC plan, and both legendary lords for them suck. It's not like a situation on Norska where Trog can actually be pretty solid despite all the issues the race has. No, the ogres are just awful. Either way, let's talk about Skaven. For Skaven, you have 3 DLC Legendary Lords, which are the best of the race in terms of action effects, in terms of skill lines, in terms of unique mechanics that they have. And those are, of course, Snikch, Frot, and Claw. Snikch wins out, hands down. The reason is not because he's necessarily so far ahead of either Claw or Frot. I mean, Claw has nuclear weapons, Frot has the mega monsters and can significantly buff an army. But here's the problem for both Claw and Frot. Their starting positions are awful. Not in the sense Hellpit or Skaven Blight aren't great settlements, they are, but the fact that, well, Frot starts in Kislev sucks, Claw starts surrounded by enemies, the Wood Elves, Belegar, etc. So it is obviously a major issue in their campaigns to deal with all of that. To deal with all of those. So they have a very slow start compared to Snikch. Snikch has a very easy start, and they even buffed it, because you would start in such a position and it would take you 2 turns to take the Village of the Moon as a settlement. Now, however, you can take it on turn 1. And the faction effects you have are great. Like the Savage Orcs over here, your starting army can genuinely defeat the Savage Orcs over here. You might not do it on auto-resolve, you might have to fight them manually, but the Savage Orcs, because they have no armor on their units, and you start with a decent number of ranged units, or units that have some kind of ranged attack, as well as a poison wind mortar unit, which just devastates foes, you will be able to easily annihilate these guys in battle with your starting army. And of course, you do start with the ability of recruiting Night Runners from turn 1. The Den of Dread Deeds, you know what, it would be better if that particular den actually gave you the ability of recruiting all the way to Death Runners. If it had different tiers, I think that would be particularly great, just for recruitment purposes, because you still have to build a hidden layer, unfortunately, for the hero and for the better unit recruitment. That is a bit unfortunate over there. I mean, it is a great landmark because of all the income, control, and growth it provides. By our unit recruitment options, it's a bit lackluster. Faction-wide effects, you get clan issuing, shadowy dealing actions. You have a recruitment cost plus 200% for all non-issue units. A recruitment cost, not an upkeep cost. Remember that. So it might be expensive to recruit things like Plague Claws, but you can still do so, and if you just are willing to pay the initial cost. And then you don't have to deal with loyalty for your lords, and Night Runners and Gut Runner units use armor-piercing, warp-infused projectiles. This makes these far more dangerous. Now, getting these units in any Skaven campaign is the way to go. I mean, if you're playing Claw, sure, you would get some weapon teams, but you'd still fill your armies with Gut Runners and Night Runners, especially the Slingers, because they're just the best units. Like, they're better in melee than Clan Rats, and they're gonna do quite well in range as well. And you can kite the enemy to death, especially as Snikch, because of all the armor-piercing damage, which is going to be useful since Cafe has heavily armored units. So it makes perfect sense for Snikch to be in Cafe. He's well suited for it. Then you get an ambush success chance plus 25%, concealment bombs, which just hide the target, and plus a melee attack for embedded heroes. His special skill line wise, well, he gets Expert Thief, he gets Ratfu, which is always fun to talk about, he gets Slippery, which gives him speed and melee defense, and he gets From the Shadow as well. So this gives Unspotable Stock, Snipe, when affects allies in range. You get Jump Scare, so a further ambush success chance and defense chance, reduces enemy leadership, and as well as leadership and melee attack and ambushes. Unlike some other legendary lords, Skarsnik, who gets a bunch of ambush benefits, you have the stock chance, which stance, which is great, because all that ambush success chance that you're getting with Snikch combined with the stock chance means you're basically always going to ambush an enemy, or you're going to have a very, very high chance of ambushing an enemy. Then you get campaign movement range, strider, and charge bonus for his army, speed for infantry units, concealment bombs for night runners and gut runners, minus 10% upkeep, hero and lord crew rank +3, melee defense and physical resistance, and attrition suffered by defender plus 15% while laying siege or encircling, reduce and reduction of control and enemy leadership when you're laying siege. So he's pretty good at laying siege as well. And we don't stop over there either. We also have the shadowing dealings, which are the Eshin actions and the clan contracts. So the Eshin actions are a bunch of actions you can take primarily with Snikch, though some of the more important ones are with Snikch, but you also have some that you can take with either Eshin sorcerers or assassin lords or heroes. And these will do a bunch of things, like you have a bunch of schemes available that you can use for these Eshin actions. You can get more schemes if you do Night Lord says so. Now, you're going to require a certain high enough level, like the first one requires you to get level 5 for Snikch. The second one is going to require an even higher level and a higher level to get more available schemes. But the things you have available are absolutely ridiculous. Like you can steal up to 4,000 money from a settlement and reduce its income by 10%. You can grant ownership of a rival Skaven army if led by a legendary lord. They do not join your faction, but you do gain an enemy army. You get ownership of a rival Skaven undercity. You can get ownership of over an entire Skaven settlement. It is pretty damn ridiculous what you do have available. And then we have the special. We then have the special actions that only Snikch can do. So we can get Silver's Pestilence that stops recruitment, reduces growth, and causes attrition to force the local province. Destroys an enemy army on sea. Destroys all buildings in a settlement, leaving only the main settlement building behind. And you can also plunge into anarchy. Now, this is now all of these have very long cooldowns, right? Plunge into anarchy has a 100 turn cooldown. But you can eliminate a faction leader completely. A legendary lord. You can, like, if you're dealing with Grimgor, you can kill Grimgor without having to fight him in battle. And he will be completely eliminated. Not in the sense, oh, he's just dead, he's wounded, he'll recover. No, he will die. He will be completely removed. He will be completely removed from the campaign map. That is absolutely ridiculous. Furthermore, Snikch has a great starting position. He has a great starting province. Though, keep in mind, Singpo is vulnerable to Zhao Ming, who is going to be attacking you. So you kind of need to move north very, very quickly, deal with Miaoying, and then turn around to deal with Zhao Ming before he becomes a problem, before he starts raiding your territory. But after that, you're in a pretty good position. Lokir might be an issue because he doesn't particularly like you. Well, no one really likes the Skaven for a lot of reasons. For many, many good reasons. Though you can form an alliance with Lokir, you're probably just going to have to take something like the Celestial Monastery and sell it to him. But then you're going to have to be careful about the Jade Custodians, who may take Zimpol. Like, Zimpol is the natural choke point of your territory because it's the only territory that Cafe can easily attack over here from the south. And the factions to the north should be dealt with as they are on your main expansion path. So deal with all of that. You may want to take the Great Bastion or just ignore it. Though if you ignore it, of course, the Cafean faction there is going to be a problem. Don't expect any help from Village. Like, you could take the Great Bastion and just sell it to Village or his vassal. Get good relations with them. You might end up having a bit of a problem with Zaytan, because Zaytan does want to take Cafe, and I think the AI is kind of scripted to try and achieve its campaign victory conditions. So Zaytan is interested in taking out Miaoying, and also taking Nat Gao potentially. And after that, like after you deal with the north, you then have to deal with the south, which is Yao Ming and other Cafean factions around here. But you are strong enough to do so. So Snikch has a great starting situation, a great starting army, good faction effects, good mechanics, good lord effects. He has everything going in his favor. For the Tomb Kings, it is Arkhan the Black by far and away. He starts basically on turn 1 with control of an entire province in the Land of Assassins. Now, it's not necessarily the best province for the Tomb Kings, because you would obviously ideally have settlements without ports, so you could start constructing barracks in them. But it's not too bad either, and the Land of Assassins is one of the best starting areas in the game, or one of the best provinces in the game, because it's extremely safe. Very few armies are going to make their way across the Great Desert of Araby, and even if they do, they're going to have to attack your capital. So you're only vulnerable here either via the sea or from the north. And you can easily see any invader given the line of sight from the sea, no problem. So really the only vulnerability here is from the north. Funnily enough, you can actually get along quite well with the dwarves. You can even vassalize them and have a further line of defense if you're playing Arkhan the Black. Over here in this particular province is pretty ridiculous. Don't pick a fight with the dwarves. They actually are one of the few factions that can stand up to you, because you don't have great armor piercing early on in your campaign. Beyond that, one of the main limiting factors for the Tomb Kings is the fact they only start with 1 army. Except Arkhan. Arkhan starts with 2, because the developers were like, well, everyone kind of hates him, so let's give him an extra army so he can be competitive against the other Tomb Kings. Yeah, Arkhan does not care right now. I mean, that benefit may have made sense in Warhammer 2, absolutely. It doesn't really make sense in Warhammer 3 anymore. If anything, Cetra is the one who desperately needs an extra starting army in his campaign, not Arkhan. Arkhan also gets the benefit that he starts with the Book of Nagash already. He starts with the 9th Book of Nagash. So he's going to be able to build a grave hill into the ancient burial mound. Okay. And the benefit here is you get a lot of unit capacity at tier 1 in every settlement for these units. You're getting 4 Crypt Ghouls, 4 Direwolves, 4 Fellbats. While these units aren't the best units you can get in the Tomb Kings roster, they're a lot better than Skeletal Warriors or Skeletal Spearmen that are the only other units you can recruit. And you can do it in any settlement at tier 1. You do get also a diplomatic benefit to it, Vampire Coasting Counts, though that doesn't really matter too much. I mean, you can make a deal with Luther, for instance, if you so desire, or Manfred, though I would personally wipe out Manfred. You need to wipe out Manfred if you're playing as Arkhan, because you need his territory to win the campaign. Which, yes, it is silly, but victory conditions need to be updated. The books in Nagash, how you acquire them, need to be updated. I mean, the Tomb Kings are okay as a race. They just need an easier way to get an extra army. Faster, better ways of getting Anopic Jars, and an update to their victory conditions, as well as an update to how they acquire books of Nagash. Like, the Chaos Dwarves can acquire the books of, can acquire the Dwarven artifacts by having military alliance or vassalization agreements. You don't have that luxury with the books of Nagash, unfortunately, as the Tomb Kings. Now, special skill line wise, you're looking at Lord Effect. You're getting melee attack and Winds of Magic Power Reserve. Pretty solid. Casualty replenishment, local recruitment capacity, missile strength plus 15% for a Casket of Souls. And now, for now, you can get the Casket of Souls on turn 1. Though, unfortunately, is a bit expensive, but no problem. We can deal with that very quickly. Just go over here to Manfred, declare war on the Tomb Kingdoms, and get a bit of money. Don't you just love how this kind of thing works? Or go to Rapunz and declare war on the Strigos Empire over here in her campaign. Or some other factions, and then get the Casket of Souls, which I think is generally the best choice. Some people will argue that getting the Necrotect Hero is the better choice. Personally, I think having as many Casket of Souls from the beginning of your campaign instead of waiting for the cooldown is probably the smarter decision. I mean, this is the hilarious thing. Like, they made him... Like, they buffed all the Tomb Kings General Lords by allowing them to get the Casket of Souls. But do you know who benefits from that the most? Yeah, it's Arkhan, because, like, over here, like, it's actually a mistake for me to recruit the second army before doing the right. Like, I could get a Lord at rank 4 from turn 1 as Arkhan. It is so absurd. It gets even better. Because the only faction, because you can also get control over the coast of Arab, which is also a pretty good place. I mean, you get that diplomatic benefit with Sartosa, so they're not going to attack you. Usually, like, if you take this territory, let's say you're playing Rapans or you're playing someone else who take this territory, Sartosa is likely going to declare war on you. Well, they won't declare war on Arkhan, and the dwarves can be neutralized, and then you can move over here, take the Crackland, take the Great Desert of Araby, move against Cetra, and annihilate Cetra in battle. You're stronger than him. You have more armies than him. He's not going to be able to stop you. So Arkhan just is a powerhouse of faction, and I'd say honestly in a lot of ways he's probably the only legendary lord worth a damn for the Tomb Kings right now. The others are just too limited by the army limitations that just take too long to get past. Starting with 2 armies is such a significant benefit at the beginning of your campaign, it's not even funny. My advice though, if you're going to play Arkhan, you kind of want to you may want to have the 5th book of Nagash over here in this arm, because the book order is randomized. So for instance here, the 5th book of Nagash is in Skaven Blight. I am not going for Skaven Blight. I think that's silly. That's something that needs to be updated. Maybe there is a mod that does so, but Arkhan does have a lot of benefits. He gets more units, he gets more armies. He has diplomatic relations with certain factions that help secure his flank, because your entire ocean flank or coastline is secure because, well, you can get along well with Luthor and Arkhan. He's eventually going to get wiped out, but the Lizardmen are rarely going to attack you because they're going to encounter other issues, specifically of the nature of the floppy bird that's down south in the Chaos Wastes. Getting to the Vampire Coast, it is Aranessa Saltspite. Now, this may seem a bit of an odd choice, but I'll explain why this is. The Vampire Coast has good lords, good artillery, and good heroes, but their overall unit roster is not that great in general, because it's low leadership, low armor, so they'll take a lot of damage and they'll break very easily. And when they break, they won't just run out from the battlefield, they'll just completely disintegrate. So it's very, very easy, especially in siege battles, to lose your entire army as the Vampire Coast. This is one of the main issues they have. They do have some good units with the Depth Guard, but Depth Guard are a tier 4 unit, which are also pretty expensive to maintain, though the cost isn't really the biggest issue. They do have some good choices of units, in particular from the Desolate Shoal chain. Not necessarily the armored hulks, but if you're thinking about sirens, or if you're thinking about Mournguls, and then later on Rotting Leviathans, sure. Necrofex Colossi, from my perspective, are a bit of a disappointment as a unit. I mean, they are okay, but considering how high of a tier as a unit they are a disappointment. There's many, many other better tier 5 units in the game than they are. So, all the other Vampire Coast Legendary Lords will have pretty weak armies for a large portion of their campaign. Not Aranessa. Faction-wide effects, she has minus 100 diplomatic relations with Norsca, which is okay. That is a bit bizarre considering she is a Norscan. She's a mermaid, she's alive, she's not undead, and yes, there are issues with having a non-undead faction leader in an undead faction. That is a problem. But she does get 20% income from sacking settlements. That's the only benefit that actually really matters. The other ones are irrelevant. Lord effect-wise, she gets Queen of Tides, so she's getting a character leadership aura effect, plus 12, plus a melee attack, plus 20%, weapon strength for Sartosan units. Then she has all of these skills that she can get, so she can get minus control for enemies, income from enemy buildings. She gets local recruit capacity, campaign movement range, and melee defense for Sartosan units, charge bonus for Sartosan units, bonus versus large recruit rank for Sartosa units, melee attack, and missile strength for artillery units, and fire resistance. Then her special skill line is Mutant, so she's getting HP, armor, weapon strength, missile resistance for Rotting Prometheans and Rotting Leviathans, pretty solid, and 10% upkeep for Sartosan units and those Rotting Prometheans and Rotting Leviathan units. 5% campaign movement range, casualty replenishment, and leadership for Sartosa units. She's actually pretty great when it comes to casualty replenishment because she's getting plus 13% campaign movement range with her skills. Then 15% ammunition for artillery units, for carronades, mortars, and Queen Bess units. And then she can get increased plunder from encounters at sea, melee attack, and defense. And she has Rotting Promethean as a mount. She isn't the best in battle. In fact, she's probably the worst in battle, but this isn't Warhammer 2 anymore. In Warhammer 2, generally the best legendary lords, or many of the best legendary lords, are the ones that could have one really powerful army because it was difficult to maintain multiple armies until much later in the game. Warhammer 3 is about getting as many good armies as possible as early as possible in a campaign. And that's where Aranessa excels as a legendary lord, because she can recruit from every tier 1 port. She can recruit Sartosa Free Company and Sartosa Militia. Sartosa Militia aren't too important, but Sartosa Free Company are. What these guys are basically hobgoblin cutthroats that the Chaos Dwarves have. They're basically on the same level as units. They won't scale very well in the late game, but they're decently armored. Better leadership than every other unit you can recruit early on in the campaign. And they have pretty solid melee stats. They're not nasty Skulkers level of power, but they will certainly hold their own in a fight. And because of the better armor and better leadership, they'll actually do better in auto-resolve, which is one of the main weaknesses of a Vampire Coast legendary lord. You might win every battle if you fight them manually, though you won't be able to use your army. You'll just be able to use your artillery. But at the same time, while you may win every battle, you might have to to manual fight every battle because the auto-resolve is that awful. Less so for Aranessa. And she can recruit these units in every single one of her armies. Later on, at tier 3, she can get Man-Eaters. Now, these are worse than Depth Guard, but they will still do a really, really good job. They're the same upkeep as Depth Guard, and you can get them one tier earlier. So you can run around with a full stack of Man-Eaters and decimate everything in your path using them. Pretty good units. In fact, you might get more Man-Eaters than an Ogre Legendary Lord will in their campaign. Now, you do need to own the Ogre Kingdoms DLC in order to get access to Man-Eaters from a port, but you do want ports because ports actually provide a good amount of income. And the more ports you have, the more income from ports you're generating faction-wide. So that's really the benefit Aranessa has in her army, that she can get entire armies of Man-Eaters and Sartosa Free Company to support, or to be supported by the really powerful lords, heroes, and artillery that the Vampire Coast do have. Furthermore, she actually has a pretty solid starting position. You might not think of it as such if you decide to stay over here in Tylea, but you don't have to stay over here in Tylea. Sure, you want to take them out, sack their settlements, get the treasure over here, all well and good. But once you're done with their capital, here's what you should do. You sell all of this to Ikekla. He'll give you a fortune, he'll become a solid, reliable ally. Yes, it's hilarious thinking of Skaven as solid, reliable military allies. And you can basically leave AI Ikekla to deal with everything else. So the entirety of Athaloran and Belegar. He may not win this fight, but he won't lose it either. So Sartosa itself will stand. And while you're also dealing with that, you might also want to wipe out Belegar's starting settlement over here, because that will eliminate his initial unit recruitment. And it's going to take him a while, even on Legendary, to get back up. So you can help Ikekla, but you can also do a lot more. You can set up a Pyre Cove over here in Myrmidons. You can set up another one in Mingle over here, unless Scarbrand decides to burn to the ground. That's always a bit of an issue. And then you can cross the sea and go into the coast of Araby and in the Land of Assassins, both of which are great provinces for you as the Vampire Coast, because you will get quite a few ports. Kofar isn't necessarily the best port in the world, but the capital here of Al-Haik certainly can be great, and then you can set up a Pyre Cove in Zandri, or just take it and sell it to someone else, maybe Cetra, wipe out the dwarves, sell the territory to someone else, maybe make an alliance with Volkmar, maybe make an alliance with someone that's willing to take this territory off your back. Or just ally the dwarves if you so desire, and give all of this territory to them, and then move to eliminate Noctilus. And you have the army to do so. Noctilus will always lose to Ulfwan, he'll just be down to the Galleon's graveyard, which you can take. And then you have the flexibility to do whatever you want in your campaign. Either continue the fight over here to help Ikaclaw, or cross the ocean and just beat up Luthor Arkhan going into Lustria. Plenty of choices, plenty of decisions available in this particular campaign. And it does end up working quite well for you if you're playing Aranessa. So although she's technically the weakest and the worst Legendary Lord, she actually has the best campaign of all of them, because you at least have good armies. Well, quote-unquote good armies. They're not the best in the world, but they will get the job done. And once you get those mana ears, things really turn in your favor, assuming you can afford them. Hostin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.